Hello, this video was initially uploaded March 20th, 2024. This version has been censored to either remove or blur out a piece of copyrighted content. I apologize for the inconvenience.
Hey, how's it going? I was initially going to start making a number of inaccurate statements about Jurassic Park, such as claiming the 1993 film was the first entry in the series, which species were there, calling pterodactyls dinosaurs, etc., to piss people off enough to, hopefully keep watching the video. But then I remembered I'm probably better off being somewhat credible, because last time I did something off the top of my head, I made mistakes immediately. Anyways, the thesis of this video is looking at the dinosaurs of Jurassic Park as a metaphor for media preservation. First things first, for however many people who don't know what Jurassic Park is, in short, it is a franchise that spawned from a sci-fi horror novel about a theme park / nature preserve / showcase for de-extinct species, recreated via genetic modification in universe by engine. The franchise focuses on themes such as chaos, the hubris of humanity, and the ethical use of technology, to name a few. So, what is media? Second definition, according to Oxford, is the plural form of medium, which brings us to a few different definitions, which include, but are not limited to, an agency or means of doing something. 2. The intervening substance through which impressions are conveyed to the senses or a force acts on objects at a distance. 3. The material or form used by an artist, composer, or writer. Or 4. A particular form of storage for digitized information such as magnetic tape or disk. I'd also like to expand the fourth one here to not necessarily require that the information being stored to be digital. For the sake of clarity and the purpose of this video, the definition of medium likely falls closer to the content, expression, or experience contained within a medium. For example, the movie contained on a Blu-ray disc of Rango. This brings us to the next question: what is a dinosaur? To quote Wikipedia, dinosaurs are a diverse group of reptiles of the group Dinosauria. Super specific. I know. You can't see me blinking on command because I don't have that set up. The wrist and hips are a large part in determining if a creature was a dinosaur. Basically, dinosaur hips are structured so that they force the legs underneath the body, creating an upright stance, and their wrists are a half-moon shape, which, if I understand properly, limits the ability for wrist rotation, but allows for more flexibility, which is kind of how birds are able to fold their... Also, this is why pterodactyls are not dinosaurs. Unfortunately, Shakira, their hips and their wrists are lying. A few major groups of dinosaurs include Oricynthia, I don't know how to say that, I don't speak Latin, Sauropodomorpha, Theropoda, and aves. Yes, that means birds. What is a fossil? As defined by Oxford Languages, is the remains or impression of a prehistoric organism preserved in petrified form or as a mold or cast in rock. I guess I was looking at the etymology of this. Media itself can act as a form of preservation of expression and vision. But how many pieces of media are created, destroyed, and forgotten? Fossilization in all of its forms requires a very specific set of circumstances, extremely unlikely to happen on their own. Why does media preservation matter? Cheesy as it is, media holds meaning to people. While the creation of art is not exclusively human, it can be seen as an expression of humanity. The preservation of media allows for humanity to share knowledge generations after it was discovered. It also allows us to know of our mistakes so that we may not repeat them. For the most part, the dinosaurs of Jurassic Park are cloned from their long-dead genetic donor. Creatures that lived as they were, true dinosaurs, unadulterated by man, in their natural environment, a place that was molded by them just as much as they molded it. Media is similarly created by and then goes on to create the landscape of its existence. Evolution is the process in which organisms collectively adapt to their environment. For example, after immediately not dying off, various pressures caused theropod dinosaurs to, stay around, keep their feathers, and adapt them towards flight, evolve beaks, and other things. Which is why dinosaur nuggets are made out of dinosaur. Paleontologist here, but this effectively super condenses things. In a sense, dinosaurs still exist today through birds. About a paragraph or two ago, I mentioned that media should be preserved so that we do not repeat the mistakes of the past. And to provide a more light-hearted example regarding how Howard Scott Warshaw is more or less the man responsible for nearly destroying an industry in its infancy, we need to first talk about the Greeks and etymology. So, this is gonna be a little story time on how a bunch of different mediums kind of interacted with each other and created a landscape that we kind of see today. So, the ancient Greeks were well known for their poetry, such as the Iliad. I should go somewhere to Greece. The ancient Greeks were well known for their poetry, such as the Iliad, which details the Trojan War. According to the poem, the Spartans were able to win the war by feigning surrender, gifting the Trojans a large sculpture of a horse. Unbeknownst to the city of Troy, this was a deception by the Spartans. They were hiding inside the horse and were awaiting an opportunity to jump out and kill everyone. Good times. Pretty sure Geneva would not like that. In Greece, Odeons, or singing places, were more or less theaters for musical performances, such as the Iliad would have been. So, jump forward a few centuries. Film as a medium now exists, and movies are really popping off. During the rise of movies, there were these dedicated movie theater buildings called Nickelodeons, named after the Odeon and the price of admission, which was a nickel. And by mid-20th century, sound and color were fairly standardized in film at this point. In early cinema, however, showtimes were not standardized. It was just a kind of, you pay, you sit down, and you chill until it loops back to where you enter, which is why there are movies where people just kind of walk in and out of the movie theater and no one seems to question it. This all changed with Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, a movie insisted needed to be watched from start to finish. And as it started, movies started becoming more scheduled, as you weren't allowed just to waltz in whenever you want and catch the next show. By the 70s, the technology for home video was starting to become available to the public.
Watch. Terrific! But suppose it's over 3 hours. Relax. Panasonic VHS tapes up to 4 hours of sports, movie specials on one cassette.
According to Wikipedia, VHS was released in September of 1976, something that would go on to revolutionize film by allowing people to watch movies whenever they wanted at home, far more reasonable manner than older projectors. So, in 1982, E.T. was released in theaters and would go on to become the highest grossing film for 11 years. However, it would take 6 years before people could watch E.T. at home. What did they do in the meantime? Well, a movie designed to be E.T. for the next generation was released. It was Mac and Me, more or less McDonald's E.T. 6 years, not even a decade removed from the movie that inspired it, and made obsolete by E.T. seeing its VHS release the same year, 1988, by the way. So what did people really do in the meantime? Well, you see, just about a year after the VHS released, there was this thing called the Atari 2600, and people loved it. And it was decided that the Christmas, hot item was gonna be the E.T. video game for the Atari 2600 of Christmas 1982. With just 5 weeks of development time, Howard's magnum opus was finished and became the most commonly cited reason for the video game market crash of 1983. To be fair, it was really more of the straw that broke the camel's back because the Atari was rampant with shovelware. And for those who don't know, shovelware is basically kind of like garbage, super cheap games made to trick your grandma into thinking it's something out. The public and the economy lost all faith in video games, and mainly considered it to be just a fad. By the time of E.T.'s home release, however, the video game industry was doing surprisingly well. Who was to claim credit? Well, there was this Japanese company founded in 1889, whose name translates to leave luck to heaven. Alright? They're known as Nintendo, the red plumber guys, and the Nintendo Entertainment System. So generally, there were better graphics, better quality control through lockout chips, a seal of quality. Software for the NES was generally going to be less garbage than what was on the Atari. Not that really a whole lot of stuff ever holds up, but this was all relative. How did they get the NES into the American household, you ask? The system itself was redesigned to look far more like a VHS player and was, as you heard earlier, called an entertainment system rather than a video game system. There's also a couple bundles. One of the bundles that you get was a deluxe set that included a robot, some sort of dance pad thing I think called the Power Pad, a light gun. Hey, it's me, Editing Teedler, just here to let you know I'm doing a correction in post. Anyways, when I said the Power Pad was included with a couple bundles, I was wrong. From what I can tell, that didn't happen. Ultimately, these were all a distraction to get people to buy the system so they could buy the better games. Where can I experience the software that almost killed an industry and the software that was used to trick people into buying the stuff that revived it? There are no modern methods. The official ways are to have decades-old hardware. When I say decades-old pieces of hardware, I don't mean you just need a copy of the game and the system or something that'll play it. You need an old-ass TV for some of this. Regardless of the quality of what nearly killed a medium and the lie to revive it and the doctor that actually healed it, these pieces of media should be preserved so that we can better understand them. So my point is with the whole Media that I was mentioning earlier and fossils is that, much like how fossils are only a sample of whatever the thing was because there weren't active efforts to preserve it, the same thing can happen without active efforts to preserve media, or media that was around before there were proper methods to preserve it. Genetic modification. The work needed to preserve media across mediums. As previously mentioned, the dinosaurs of Jurassic Park are genetically modified, either as a requirement to have enough DNA to make a viable creature, or solely for that cash money. To follow our home video tangent, films may see fairly drastic changes between their original theatrical and home releases. Now, back to when the VCR was the height of technology, there was a major disconnect between the aspect ratio of a movie theater screen and the average home television. For the sake of editing, I'm going to recommend watching this video by Noodle, and maybe this one too, for something far more informative regarding aspect ratios. Now, realistically, in the film department, made-for-television content should be pretty easy to move from platform to platform, as the original airings and home and streaming releases presumably shouldn't change the aspect ratio. Except when they do. With that aside, it's important to note that even when the core content is unchanged, the atmosphere around a piece of media may be difficult to recreate, as content created for television was created around individual channels, programming blocks, and even the advertisements scheduled around them. For streaming services, sometimes they still have advertisements. Now, I have a story about how a streaming service can manage to destroy the viewing experience of a piece of media. Now, I wanted to watch Santa Claus is Coming to Town on some streaming service that was on Roku. This was the single most infuriating watch of this movie I have ever had. Now, what's important to remember about the Rankin Bass special is it was made for television. That means it was designed with ad breaks in mind. Growing up, I watched the DVD release. Because these commercial breaks were taken into account, the pacing at times can feel a bit rushed in certain scenes when the special is seen on its own. Now, one would assume whatever streaming service, considering they'd already purchased the ad rights, would have scheduled ad breaks to coincide with either the integrated ad breaks or to at the very least go between scenes. This is not what happened. That was too much for them. They threw ads in the middle of scenes, mid-line, and on one ad break, I got 8 ads. Now this wouldn't be so bad, except for the fact 4 of them were the same Netflix ad. 2 of those were in a row. And I'm pretty sure every other ad in that break I'd already seen multiple times. As I mentioned earlier, media preservation requires, generally speaking, to change at least a piece of media somewhat. For example, going from analog to digital. One of the interesting things to see is that technological limitations of media can still be seen long after those limitations are no longer a problem. For example, looking at Mickey Mouse, Sonic the Hedgehog, Mario, Crash Bandicoot, all of these characters have features that were introduced either for visual legibility or for cost-saving measures. The dinosaurs of Jurassic Park are not dinosaurs as they were, but how we thought they were, with adjustments made to allow them to exist today. Some of these adjustments, even for the pure breeds of Jurassic World Dominion, likely needed a few changes in order to survive the modern era. For example, their respiratory system likely needed changes to account for the reduced oxygen content of the modern atmosphere. Living fossils. Living fossils are creatures that superficially resemble their ancient ancestors. Ferns are a good example for dinosaurs because grass didn't exist. We got crocodiles, gilled sharks, a list of mammals I may or may not pull up, which doesn't really fit what I'm going for. In media, this could be seen as media that changes very little between releases. For example, a presumably perfect made-for-TV to home release to streaming deal. Blu-ray to streaming, yeah. I'm not much of a book person, but this would be a case for reprints and digital re-releases. I would also like to note even simple reprints occasionally may result in various parts of a work either seeing improvements or detriments. For example, here's my Muppet Christmas Carol bit that I'm stealing from Cat Icarus.
They cut out one of the most important and integral scenes of that movie that not only is completely heartbreaking, naturally explains the turning point of Scrooge's character as to why he is the way he is in the present, and has a song that is even reprised at the end of the movie to resolve not only Scrooge's character but the entire central theme of the story. But the theatrical, VHS and Laserdisc versions of that film had it in there, this very crucial scene, and everything afterwards had it cut out.
As a quick correction, as far as I can tell, despite what he says here, the Love Is Gone was not included in the original theatrical release of A Muppet Christmas Carol. For example, The Mini Mice of Mr. Bryce is a pop-up book about the mice that live in the home of a Mr. Bryce, the pop-up elements of the book being more focused on being a means for the reader to interact with the mice and their quirks. All prints after the first removed 2 pop-up elements, and the book would later be split into 2 main variants. One that reuses the original orange cover art, but removes the interactive pop-up elements, removing a lot of the book's charm, and a retitled The Pop-Up Mice of Mr. Bryce, that reuses the cover art from an older reprinting and retains most of the original interactive elements. I'd also like to take a moment to talk about home release bonus features. Lady and the Tramp DVD had a little CD-ROM game, has not seen re-release to my knowledge. So for this segment, I have more that I want to say specifically about like video game remasters and reimaginings, but I want to save that for another video. That'll probably do right after this one, whenever that happens. Traditional media remasters are typically taking a piece of media stored on an analog format and converting it to a digital one. For example, with Jurassic Park here, this was initially shot on film, and I guess all of it was mastered on film too. Point is, digital and analog work in completely different ways. So at the time that this came out theatrically and on home video, film offered a higher resolution for the average consumer than what a VHS tape could. However, by the time 4K displays came out, they were simply able to rescan the negatives of Jurassic Park and remaster the movie, and it looks really good still. I'm going to include an ad from FedEx talking about how they saved these negatives of an Elvis movie. Remakes, basically it is an opportunity for a piece of media to be affected by the changes that it caused. That is kind of meta. I want to go back to what the script was saying. So yeah. However, sadly, not every piece of media is properly preserved. They become lost to the general public, and as is the case with about half of JoJo's Circus, among others. JoJo's Circus being a stop-motion series on Playhouse Disney about a clown that lived in a circus. Only about half of the episodes are either preserved at all or are preserved at like low quality. An example of lost media being found is Out of Jimmy's Head. In a time frame between like 2009 and 2010, there was a see-in reel block where they were really focusing on live action content. For the most part, the see-in reel block was not well received. So what caused Cartoon Network to think that the see-in reel block was a good idea? Back in 2006, they released a 4TV movie called Reanimated.
All Jimmy Roberts ever wanted
I mean, me.
was to be popular.
That's cool.
But now,
This boy needs an emergency brain transplant.
everybody wants him for his brain.
I heard you got moved to Applebee's brain.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Except it has a mind of its own.
Hiya, Jimmy!
It's the oddest, weirdest, freakiest original movie ever to hit the small screen.
We're all in your head.
Except Pickles, he's in your ear.
Reanimated premieres Friday, December 8th on Cartoon Network.
Anyways, the next year, this got a show called Out of Jimmy's Head that lasted 1 season. And I guess that did well enough that they decided to do see-in reel in 2009 until 2010. Of the 20 episodes, only like the first 3 saw any sort of physical release, with the remaining like 17 kind of being captured from like international airings that they had the English audio for. So the whole series has been found, but this is only as of like October 2023 that the entirety of a series that had been, you know, more or less gone for over a decade had been found. So in a script version of this, I talked about how I hadn't explicitly talked about physical media. I've talked about it a bit more in this version, so I'm just going to go off what the script has. To bring fossils and physical media back into this, that's the connection, I guess. Physical media is extremely important to the preservation of media as a whole, as it puts more copies into the world. However, there's an irony to the conveniences and drawbacks of physical versus digital copies. Digital copies are easier to obtain and almost literally infinitely obtainable and replaceable, making it incredibly easy for people to get new copies for a time. For all the drawbacks of physical media around storage, distribution, and the difficulty of replacement, they have a few massive benefits. On a purely economical scale, there's resellability, and by extension, lendability. Not that I ever would, because I am a hoarder at heart.
Welcome to my house. As you can see, I've knocked over many chairs because I get so tilted at the towers.
This isn't really a tilted or a tower.
Well, you see, it's a gamer pad. That's the difference between you and I, Silver the Hedgehog. I'm a alpha gamer. Anyway, where are we dropping, boys?
Physical copies are irrevocable and uneditable. No amounts of bands can revoke my copy of Chibi Robo from my possession. As a physical good, they are not bound to licensing agreements outside of the time of printing, as seen with Sony revoking access to Discovery content at the end of 2023. And assuming everything is on the physical copy, these physical copies will outlast the servers that distributed their digital counterparts, allowing for others to experience them either through resale or temporary exchanges. Physical copies exchange their infinite replaceability via download for the ability to transcend device and owner. The power of distribution removed from corporations and put into the hands of the consumer. Enter Biosyn. Piracy. For those not in the know, I want to say real quick, the whole Jurassic Park thing, pretty obviously, not a perfect metaphor here. Really more of a framing device than anything. Returning to Biosyn, for those not in the know, is a competitor to InGen, the company in universe that created Jurassic Park. Biosyn, by using corporate espionage to obtain embryos, kicks off the conflict of the first and final Jurassic Park movies. More or less, Biosyn is looking to copy and distribute the intellectual property of InGen, or in other words, pirate it. Piracy is perhaps the best thing that can happen to a piece of media in regards to its preservation. I'm not going to go into the morals and ethics of piracy, as that's not the point of this video, and it's a nuanced topic. I'm just going to leave this at, if you can reasonably pay for a piece of media, you should do that. As previously mentioned, digital distribution is limited by licensing agreement. Every problem of distribution regarding rights and ownership simply does not matter in the face of stealing it. I would also like to point out that this does allow for fans to make changes to specific pieces of media, and editions available at least digitally. Additionally, I'd like to point out this allows for fans to take pieces of a media and make specific prints and editions available at least digitally, by either fixing or removing changes added in later releases. For example, the despecialization of Star Wars. Now, to bring my specific examples back to where we started, it's easy to watch a copy of E.T. today, the film that popularized home video, the game that nearly destroyed a medium. Not so much. Never saw a re-release. There are two ways to experience it: track down a copy and a piece of hardware that accepts the cart, or just pirate a copy and emulate it. So my point is, Dinosaurs are VHS tapes or something, and you should consider the value of your physical media before replacing it with streaming services or downloaded versions. Anyways, media is cool. Tell me, I don't know, about some piece of media you like in the comments section. Either I'm going to talk about Rango or do a follow-up video to this next. So yeah, I'll see you on the other side.